So yeah, delivering presentations is actually really quite difficult. So we're in a position at the moment where you've got multiple people trying to deliver a cohesive presentation to a client, which can be really quite challenging. So one of the things that we are finding that we need to consider, and probably more for the future, is how do we make sure that we have all the appropriate tools at our disposal to make sure this happens. It involves an awful lot more planning and preparation. You've got 3 or 4 or 5 people trying to deliver a presentation to a client, and it needs to come across seamless as it would do in a room. So all of this training actually really needs to go into place to make sure that people have the right tools at their disposal in order to come across in the way that they would want to. One of the other things that we are ending up doing because of the circumstances in which we're in at the moment is doing virtual handovers. We have physical sites that we are delivering, so that involves having done all of the electrics, having done all of the mechanical systems, having done the design, having done painting, furniture installations, and delivering that final product is actually quite an impressive thing often to go and see. Clients want to see, they want to get into the detail, they want to see the quality of what you've actually produced. And obviously for a client to want to take that space from you, they want to see everything that you've done. They want to get involved, they want to touch it and feel that space. At the moment, that is obviously a big challenge for us as to how do we give the client the feeling and the warmth of what they wanted to visualize and take hold of as a space. The clients often aren't necessarily on the premises, so they're often traveling too. So how do we actually make sure that we can deliver that space and get the client's engagement with that space at the same time? So we've had some successful visual or virtual handovers. I think what some of the things that we've realized is that it's great to be able to do some of the administration over video conference and have a video walkthrough of that space and still get a sense and a feeling for that space, and the client is happy to take that. I think the other thing is that we're also stopping, and we can reduce the amount of travel that we need to do for some of these meetings. Not everybody is actually essential to that process to be there, but I think we will, when this circumstance changes, we will actually probably still want to go back to having virtual or physical handovers of spaces, because so much goes into it. It's about the feeling of enjoying that space and spending time in that space, and the client really wants to be able to see that. Often they're on site, but often they don't get the opportunity to kind of really get involved with what you've actually created, and that's still quite a hard thing to be able to do over virtual platforms. But I think it's surprised us how well it actually has worked, and having that ability to actually guide the client through that space, and the professional teams as well, to show them exactly what it is that we have been able to do, and get into some of the detail on video is better than having not been able to do it at all. And I think the main thing for us has been communication. Communication is still very much king in how we're actually communicating with our clients. We need to make sure that whatever the circumstances, whether it's good news, bad news, your program's been pushed back, your project's going to be delivered later than we thought, it's all about making sure that you are giving the client confidence. And whether it's communicating by picking up the phone, whether it was the fact you were able to go and see them, or if it's sending them an email or keeping them updated, I think communication has never been more important. Before we were able to get on site, we were able to see people and you could see the whites of their eyes, and you could feel that confidence. Whereas at the moment, making sure that you're communicating on a more regular basis, and just being honest and telling people exactly where you are, and you're trying your best, and it's how do we get through this kind of together, and making sure that we are communicating. Communication is still the biggest thing that we're seeing that obviously clients need, and that we're doing our best to make sure that we are able to deliver.
Perhaps virtual networking is making communication a bit easier. I mean,
it's definitely helping, and it's giving us the opportunity to have face-to-face conversations. And typically in our industry, that was never something we used to do. We're very much audio focused rather than visual focused as to how do we communicate with people. So
just to add to that, I was going to say that Kirsty and her company completed a virtual handover for an instant client a month ago, and it was just in the first few weeks of lockdown. And I can say safely that both the client and everyone at Instant was blown away by how impressive it was. I think there was a real concern. We worked really hard on this project, and we're slightly worried that you wouldn't get that wow factor. But in fact, I think the client was so impressed by the extra mile both yourselves and Instant had gone to deliver and to deliver so comprehensively. So well done on that. And it's definitely something to talk about to the audience.
So John, this is a perfect transition. The Instant Group, for those who don't know, focuses on flex office space. You're global. You're in multiple markets on other opposite sides of the pond, if I may say. So John, you head of marketing for a flex office space provider that is successful and, like I said, in multiple marketplaces. From your perspective, what are you seeing?
Well, there's two ways to answer that, so I'll try and do it both ways. Is that, yeah, so we're the biggest broker of flexible space. We have more flex space data than anyone else, I think I can say safely. So we've got this great view of how clients are looking for and then buying flex space, so co-working, serviced offices, executive suites, space as a service around the world. We saw the impact of lockdown hit in Asia probably in the beginning of January, and we could see the contagion spreading. We can see the impact on demand from clients as we went into lockdown. I would say happily in the last few weeks, we've seen demand in Asia start to come back, not quite to normal levels, but somewhere like Hong Kong, we have actually seen it return pretty much to normality so quickly post-lockdown, which is a big relief to operators in that market, but also everyone in the property sector. So it shows that companies are back up and running, but they're getting space again, and they're feeling the urge to move and get their teams client-facing, which is great news. So that's been kind of wonderful that we've had that level of insight and data during what's been a very concerning time. And a virtual networking outcome of that has been that I've ended up having a really fun but exhausting few weeks of doing probably, 50 virtual events now around the world, to varying degrees, speaking to operators, talking to heads of commercial real estate and clients around the world, trying to encourage discussion and debate and talk about our data. This is my third webinar today, all of which have been fun in different ways. And there's something quite engaging about seeing you all on the screen and having a conversation. And I think it's an exciting time. I never thought we could network this much in a virtual world and while remote working, but I'd say it's been the most fruitful probably for 6 weeks of my career in that regard. So that's a positive. A couple of things I've learned though from virtual networking is one webinar I did today at 11 was quite staged, and people just spoke to camera for sort of a set period of time. And from my point of view, all the best networking events are conversational and question and answer based, and allowing people to drip feed ideas into them the whole time. So even on a call like this one, which is a perfect size, it's good to have that debate and discussion. There were 200 people on the call this morning, and people were submitting virtual questions, and it was a bit too organized. I think it was once said to me that social media and virtual networking is like a dinner party, right? The best dinner party guest sits next to someone and asks questions all evening. Then they have a dialogue and a conversation, and they both tell stories about each other and they relate to one another. The worst dinner party guest is that old guy who's had too much booze and just talks at you all evening. And initially it's amusing, but by the end of the dinner, you're like, I've had enough of this. They're just talking at me, right? So it's just about dialogue and conversation. And Twitter and LinkedIn are just like that. You can sermonize and talk about yourself and your business, or you can ask questions and have a much more interesting dialogue where you pull in other people's views. And for me, that's kind of a good benchmark for virtual events, for Twitter pile-ins, whatever it may be. If you keep it on a conversational level and it's two-way, I think everyone benefits more. So before I then talk on too much, I'll hand back to you so that I don't turn this into me sermonizing.
It's all good, John. My favorite parts of what you just said are discussion and debate, recognizing that's, positive, healthy, and is a producer in a way, and the dinner party. So you're right. We have about 30 people on the line today, and this is a perfect size because we do want to engage participants, members, non-members, and we want to hear what they have to say after our panelists present. So Tara, you're across the pond. You're in Toronto. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you to Accrue UK for inviting me to be a part of this panel today. And to Wendy Mann, who I know is on the line, who suggested and put my name forward to Michelle. I really appreciate that. So I'm a partner at Miller Thomson, and we are a Canadian national law firm. And I'm not going to go into the current state of the legal market in Canada, but I did want to share, and I had the opportunity. I'm participating in another panel tomorrow, which is a panel which consists of the presidents of all the Canadian chapters of Accrue Network. And I had the opportunity, and I think it's really important to know the market intel about your country. We have a very large landmass. We have only about 37,000 people. And there have been different levels of shutdown, which has meant different realities from coast to coast across our very large landmass. And we have different timing with respect to reopening. So I thought I'd share a bit about that market update rather than the legal market, which I think you'd be find quite boring. So I'm just going to start from our west coast to the east coast. In Vancouver, they had a really early response, and I don't know our levels of COVID infections as well as death has been, we were able to flatten the curve, and the early response started in BC. That's where our first case was known. And there have been effects on the market, obviously, across the globe. But as I've learned from my discussion with my Accrue colleagues across Canada, the scarcity in land is saving Vancouver. The industrial and office absorption is still up. It was up before. It was up in Q1. It's been up for a number of years. And in fact, they expect a shortage in office space after the post-pandemic, I'll call it, with people requiring larger footprints to address the social distancing. And they do find that, the multifamily towers, which are prevalent in BC, will be affected with people moving or looking to move to low-rise and townhomes. But there is still absorption of the towers that are currently under construction, and retail is going to be hit hard, but the province is starting to open back up. Calgary and Edmonton and Alberta, moving eastward, they also had a very early level of shutdown. There was no halt in construction, as there was in Ontario. And in Q1, they were seeing an uptick. They had a number of years of a down market and they were coming back, but now they've been hit with a double whammy, both with respect to COVID and the oil and gas. It went down to below $1 Canadian for the first time in history during this pandemic. And Calgary is feeling the effects more so than Edmonton, which is the center of government in that province. And while industrial will feel the effects, it's going to have a quicker recovery, but they see, an 18 to 20 month or 24 month time frame for recovery. There's also repercussions we've heard. I don't know if you've seen in the news in the United States, the meatpacking industry, 70% of that market is located in Alberta, and they are being hit. Calgary is moving. They're looking to move to pivot towards AI and technology. They were considering in the past, but it's pushing it forward. What's going on now is pushing that look forward. And they are beginning their phase 1 of reopening, which actually starts tomorrow, which includes hair salons and personal service shops. So a lot of people are really excited that they can go get their hair done again. The level of shutdown in Saskatoon or Saskatchewan, that again, mid-March, leading up to the pandemic, there was an uptick in the various market segments. But the first week of the pandemic, all lending froze. Retail, as of May 1st, 50% were not able to pay their rent, followed by office about 20%. So these are estimates, 25%. But then residential and industrial, those were about below 5%. And office, going into the pandemic, they were already at about 16% pre-pandemic vacancy rates. And they're going to be hit hard presently, but in the future, as larger office footprints are required, hopefully that will not be as prevalent. Moving on to Toronto, we were early. We are the second highest number of cases in Canada, with about with quite a number of those. Oh, sorry, I set a timer. I'm going on too long. But we are starting to reopen. We are seeing a downshift. Our office is well capitalized with low vacancy rates pre-pandemic, and we see coming out of the market that our office market will still be healthy. But our residential land sales have decreased, or not land sales, but unit sales has decreased by 67% with a 10% price drop. As you continue to move across the country, Quebec, which has been the hardest hit, is already starting to reopen, but Montreal is a different case the rest of that province. Again, most of the cases have been in long-term care facilities, which there will have to be a pivot in that market in order to address all of the shortcomings that have come to light as a result of this pandemic. And then Halifax and Nova Scotia, they're really dependent on the tourism industry. We all know that the cruise industry has been hit hard, and they have a short season where they rely on a lot of cruise ship traffic. So they're not going to know the full effects until this summer, but it will be hit hard. And the president of Accrue Nova Scotia, she's at BDC, and they had more loan requests in the last 5 weeks than in any other year that has been tracked. So that's just a bit of a market update, but across the country we are starting to see lower numbers, and we are starting to see markets slowly reopen, but it's a very slow and measured response to the reopening.
Tara, thank you for that. One of the things that just came to mind about your presentation on the sort of state of markets in Canada is how virtual programming such as this is affording people an opportunity in an hour to become so much more aware of sectors, ebbs and flows of business, interdependencies, codependencies between industries, etc. So it's just very powerful that we're able to do this now and to learn and to share intel so quickly, and powerful intel at that. So, John, if we may pass the microphone back your way. In terms of ideas for virtual networking, I've enjoyed talking to you as we plan for this panel because your ideas are plentiful and your energy and how you share your ideas is greatly appreciated. You talked to Kristy, myself, and Tara about how significant our online profile is. And when you asked me if I'd Googled myself in a while, I hadn't. I brushed up my LinkedIn. However, can you talk to us a little bit about our online profile? You're networking constantly, as you just commented, and
which makes me sound kind of cheesy, that whole networking consciously thing. But I'll try and justify it. So, I was at Knight Frank before, so Newmark Knight Frank in the US, and it's a very old, very wonderful traditional company, and I joined the marketing team, and the first task was for them to make them understand social media and why it was important in the current context and quite why it had a relevance to them. Because they sell loads of houses and loads of offices, and they didn't really need to worry about it in their view. And why would you use Twitter or LinkedIn anyway, or Instagram? And then, so the way I set it up to really try and make them conceptualize this is that they admitted it, that every time they went to a meeting, whether physically or virtually, they would Google someone. And they would Google them afterwards if they didn't do it before, because they want to verify what it is they've just heard, the conversation they've just had. I think we all have a thirst for knowledge now. We use Wikipedia and Google as our way to kind of go online and to validate what we've just heard from someone. So you can check their track record, you can see whether they've been in the press and so on. And if you think about your personal Google profile as a kind of track record of your professional and personal life, a huge amount of what you do is captured there. And the first thing that Google will find invariably is your social media profiles. Most likely, if you Google your name plus your company, it will be your LinkedIn profile, number one. So people say, oh, I don't really use LinkedIn, or I'm not really on the platform, I have a profile. It doesn't really matter, because people will find your LinkedIn profile if you have one, and they'll find it via Google, and they use it to validate what they thought about you from a meeting pre or post. So to my Knight Frank partners at the time who really questioned LinkedIn or Twitter, I said, look, you use the old metaphor. If a tree falls down in the forest and no one's there, does it matter? Does it really fall down? My view is, if you have a LinkedIn profile and you don't use it, that's your problem, because someone will still find it. LinkedIn has an API directly into Google. It's highly discoverable. And that Google profile, therefore, is your LinkedIn profile, your Twitter feed, your Instagram feed, any other press snippets or things you've done whereby your name is associated with your company name. It's eminently discoverable. So you have to break it down and think, well, how can I influence my Google profile for the positive? Because unless you do influence it, Google will populate it for yourself. and I'm sure you guys are all good, but I mean, I had a few instances when I was working at Knight Frank and when I was a journalist, whereby controversial stories came up. And so they were the first things people could find out about me. Is that the first impression you want to give people when they Google you and they understand what your profile is like? So you need to think about proactively, have I updated my LinkedIn profile? Is all the information correct? Am I sharing information across my LinkedIn profile, again, which I'd want to associate with me? Am I contributing to articles, whether it's blogs or PR? Do I work with my marketing and PR teams? Because again, those blogs and those information, that's the kind of digestible information that Google hoovers up. So hopefully I'll be in Estates Gazette, the big EG property magazine in the UK tomorrow or today. For a few weeks at least, that will be one of the most discoverable things about me. So, it's there, and it's there in perpetuity. It's never going to go anywhere. So you want it to be good. Contrastingly, say, I had a couple of construction projects at Knight Frank go wrong, and I was the spokesperson for them. And so I was indelibly linked to those bad construction projects for a while until I generated enough noise and hubris around me to kind of push those down the Google rankings. So again, without the risk of going on too much, Google yourself, which sounds like the most egotistical thing to do in the world, but it's critical to do it, to think, what would someone discover about me now? And then try and break down the parts and think, well, what elements of this can I control and adjust? So first of all, LinkedIn's the most easy thing to do. Secondly, Instagram, is my account private or public? Does it mention my company in there? Twitter, same deal. And then newspaper articles and any other information. Things like company accounts information are eminently Googleable. So you want to watch that because you can appear either as a director or as a consultant. So before I make it sound too scary, Google profile is controllable and it's an opportunity. So you can change it for the better. You shouldn't be wary of it because, as per my example of the tree falling down in the forest, it's going to happen with or without you. So you need to try and take advantage of it and grab it with both hands and think, how do I turn this into something I'd want my clients or my new business contacts to find? Does that make sense? I mean, is it a good time to stop and see if anyone's got any questions, or Tara or Kirsty want to add to that?
I think we're gonna,
oh, sorry.
I'm going to unmute you.
I can unmute. Yeah, I was just going to echo. I agree with everything that John has said, and it's very important. The first time I Googled myself, I realized that my maternity photographer had posted something that was public, and I immediately called her and took it offline. My son had also. I do Google myself about once every 6 months. And you do have to be very mindful of what's out there. My son put something out on YouTube. He was 10, I think, at the time. And we just had to have a quick discussion about what is right and what is wrong and what you should and should not do. But I was able to, because I was very active in managing my profile, to nip that in the butt and make sure it was no longer out there.
Yeah. Well.
And you're not the only one. I've heard so many examples, and I've dealt with clients and people I know who've said, I've got a YouTube video, I've got an Instagram image that a friend shared of me that I really don't want to be a public or be associated with my professional profile. What can I do to get it taken down? And there are ways and means, and there's no point going into them in detail now, but you can always LinkedIn message me if you have any questions or anything around that. But these things are sort outable, but you just can't denude yourselves that they're not there, right? So without naming names, I remember one very prominent Knight Frank partner who was on Twitter, and he hadn't quite grasped the concept that if you tweet, all of Twitter can see it and it's discoverable. And he went to an England test match, and an English cricketer for some reason particularly offended him. So he took to abusing him really personally on Twitter, and his tweets were totally public. And we found this out. We were like, Mr. So-and-so, you need to stop doing this because your clients are seeing it too. And your tweets were visible, XXX tweets Stuart Broad saying, and you're like, wow, because I think some people fail to grasp just how public and discoverable these things are. Wonderful networking tools that they are. There's just that risk that it could backfire.
Well, on that note,
on top of that, I was just going to say, I think it's also important, I think, that as businesses, and PR departments, marketing departments, are able to give their staff and employees the right parameters in how to use it. Like you were saying, John, it's you need to understand how to use these tools. They can be great, but they can also be quite damaging. But we need to make sure that we're giving people the right information as to how they can use them, especially within the industries in which we work. We've got people of all sorts of technological levels of comprehension. We've also got a lot of older people that maybe aren't as technologically savvy as maybe some of the younger generations, but we don't want to cut them out of the conversation, because actually they've probably got more to offer and more enriched information. How do we make sure that we can still engage them in these conversations, but in the right way? And I should say, we're not talking either embarrassing people, or people are actually able to speak freely, but within the parameters in which they also feel comfortable.
So Kristy, this is a good time to segue and to pass it for you to keep the microphone, if I may say. You and I talked a lot about networking. You know, we speak about networking externally, right? Reaching out within our marketplace or within our business and making connections. But the power of also networking within our organizations. So would you like to share your thoughts on that?
Sure. I think, as we've said, external networking is incredibly important. Maintaining those networks, building new networks is the bread and butter of a lot of our businesses. I think some of it we've talked about being authentic and making sure that we're actually creating personalities, a bit like John was talking about your profile. It doesn't necessarily all have to be your business CV. It can also be about the things that make you interesting as a person, or the things that you're interested in, which gives you collateral to be able to talk to. People still want to do business with people, and they want to do business with people that have shared common interests, shared values, and actually people can resonate with them. I think quite a lot of what we talk about is sharing content that's of business importance, but also it's important to share content that doesn't necessarily have a business focus to it. It could be you have a passion for sport, arts and culture, sustainability. All of this content is still things that people want to hear about. And especially in the world that we're living in, as having more of these virtual meetings, we need to be able to give people an insight into us as individuals. It may give us another opportunity to connect with those people. We may not have a common interest on a business platform, but we may have a shared interest or a love for, might have been cycling, John, as we talked about before, or it could be sustainability, and how those platforms also help maybe feed into our wider business opportunities and things like that. You never know when an opportunity may come up, but building those networks doesn't necessarily need to be just about an initial sales opportunity or a business to business. It could be all this other content that you're able to engage with other people about, and give someone else an opportunity to reach out and talk to you about those other nuggets or those other topics that maybe you're particularly passionate about, or you can find and build other relationships. I think the key often in these kind of circumstances is we're all feeling we're in slightly uncharted territory. We're more exposed on a video and talking to different people. But I think people sharing some of their personal experiences, whether it's a good experience or the fact they're struggling. Not everyone's finding this lockdown particularly easy, either with mixing of homeschooling, whether it's trying to find time to exercise, whether it's trying to find time to deal with all sorts of challenges that this has thrown up to us. How are we actually sharing some of these thoughts and considerations? Because I think it allows us to have a different type of conversation and allows people to feed off support, I think, as well from other people, either within their own industry or within their broader network. And how are we able to support one another and maybe feel less stressed about the circumstances and share common experiences? That's not always a bad thing. And I think sometimes we like to share all the positives and congratulate people, and that's great. But how do we actually support people who are maybe finding some of these things hard, or lots of people are probably finding the same challenges around some of the circumstances that we're currently in. But I think as we started off, we were talking about internal and external. A lot of that is external, but I think we can't underestimate the importance of our internal networks, especially when working for large organizations. How do we make sure that we are still talking to those people that we work with? We're at the moment in a circumstance where we're working from home, we're working quite remotely from some of our colleagues, and probably some of the people within our business that we've never met before. But at the moment, we are also needing to we might need to procure things differently. We might need to speak to HR. We've never maybe spoken to HR before. We might need to speak to IT. How do we engage with those internal departments within our business where we can't just walk around the office and try and say, where do they sit and who are they and how do I talk to them? We've got to find someone to pick up the phone. We've got to find ways in order to communicate with our internal network. So I think that's also an important thing that we can't just forget. We just looking at how do we either look at our external persona, we need to actually work on making and building relationships internally, and making sure that we have the right people that we need to be able to talk to, or can find those people within our networks.
Well, that's really interesting. You just touched upon, actually, Kirsty, because I should have raised it before. Is we've probably seen a lot of these people on LinkedIn and Twitter who are out there all the time and talking so confidently about this or that, and they are the exception. I mean, it's quite hard for the vast majority of us to feel we feel constrained by corporate guidelines as to what we can or cannot say. So we feel inhibited whether we can have a view. And I note that nearly all the people I follow on Twitter or LinkedIn who are the most vocal are those who are independent or consultants, and then they're not bound by the same corporate ties. They're not constantly refracting as to how they should be reporting on a corporate line. So it's really finding your middle ground. Just one tip we do at Instant, which is easier said than done. I noticed that Jester Fresh is on the call, so she can hopefully say how helpful this is. But we send around a weekly sharing memo of all the stories and research that we've done, stories we've contributed to, but other just neutral themes we think are interesting for people in our team to share online. So it's just like it takes a little bit of time to pull it together. But as a marketing tool, I think it's really essential because it gives people the ammunition and stuff they can feel comfortable in sharing to populate their Google profile, as I state. Because it left on your own, it can be quite daunting. And I'm a former journalist, so to a degree, I'm quite confident in the written word. Not everyone is. It may not necessarily be your forte. So that's quite tricky. But Kirsty, exactly your point. Therefore, finding a middle ground, and I could bore for England about cycling, so don't get me started. But cycling has allowed me to network more in property than almost anything else I've ever done, because it's a nice, neutral thing that boring middle-aged guys like to hang out and do together, sadly. But you can say my point, it's neutral and it's safe. But the other thing to think about, though, is how can your company, if it has a scale, help you with that kind of content, and what is the approved line on information you can share? Because now is the time to be sharing it, in my view.
100%. Online. So speaking of online sharing, as a side note, on a personal note, Kirsty, speaking to something, I say a few folks on this call have seen my 6-year-old. My 6-year-old's getting into virtual networking. I mean, she lost a tooth the other day, and when I'm on work calls, she decides to come and she shows her tooth missing. So John, between homeschooling, bicycling, Kirsty, like you said, personal, it is amazing how everybody is making it work for each other and then offering up how to support one another. It's an amazing time. I'm just keeping my eye on the clock, and Tara, our third sort of, as we wrap up here, ideas for virtual networking. You and I have talked about our current network, and my boss Wendy's on the line, and when I called her and I said, and I sort of tapped into my own internal network to help me provide for this panel today. I called Wendy, I emailed Wendy, I said, okay, right, I need a panelist. And it was instinct to reach out to Wendy because she is the CEO and because she's been at this a very long time. That was my current network, and reaching out to a board member and reaching out to Kirsty. So the value of that, the significance of it, right? So I'll let you talk a little bit more about your experiences and how your current network has provided opportunity for you.
Yeah, so thank you again. I've been a member of Accrue Network since 2007, and I can tell you that my network has increased, I don't know, 1,000-fold, 2,000-fold, 3,000-fold. I don't know. I can't quantify it, but it has increased immensely since becoming a member of Accrue, and now in this environment, I think it's even more important. So I see our environment as it's just expanding. It's not contracting as a result of the present emergency. I see it as expanding. We're all actively finding new ways to connect, or rather than using existing virtual means in new ways. We're not using new platforms, but we're using them in new ways. The phone existed, internet, email, LinkedIn, Twitter, Zoom, WebEx, all of those things existed, but we have been nudged or urged, mandated, thrown into, or you could look at it as had the privilege to use these platforms in new ways at a much quicker pace. The change from the physical connection, the actual physical, to the wholly virtual, what we're doing here, I think it should be viewed as an opportunity and not an impediment. And the virtual connection is simply a connection. It has not changed. We still connect. I mean, I just met Kirsty and John Williams and Michelle in the past couple of weeks, and I feel that I know them. And it was because of this virtual connection. It's our environment that has evolved, and our existing and potential network remains the same, but the opportunities have expanded, in my view. Yes, you know, the virtual, you could get by without virtual connections before. That is just not the case anymore. The walking down the hall, the water cooler, what Kirsty was just talking about, those physical connections, they can't happen anymore. It's not going to happen again until we're in a safe, until it's safe. So more and more, it's important that we reach out virtually to connect with our network and to make further connections. I recall when I was a very junior lawyer, a senior partner saying to me in my early years, when I wasn't getting a response to an email, you can just call. Like, call? Novel concept, but that it's not novel anymore. You have to make those phone calls. You have to have those Zoom meetings. You have to have those WebEx meetings. You need to embrace them. And internally, I think, and I would just add that it's really important that those of us in senior positions make sure we reach back and talk to those more junior folks in our teams to make sure they feel involved, they feel connected. They're not the ones that are generating work, they get work from us. So it's very important that they feel a part of the team, that we continue to nurture their growth. So while there may be a nationalist undertone around the globe that I think we're all sensing in the current emergency, we're still very much a global environment. And while we may be practicing or conducting business locally, the global and national footprints are going to remain, and they're going to continue. And we're going to continue to connect and do business. But I think, as Kirsty and John have mentioned, and Michelle has alluded to, that we're connecting more on a personal level in our new environment. We're getting into the lives of each other and our crew colleagues, and we're connecting from home with all the wonderful things that go along with it, the tooth, the biking, the baby. So I think we're establishing deeper connections and a deeper understanding of each other that we wouldn't have done in the normal business world prior to this. So looking forward into the future, our connections to our network, our clients or otherwise, I think they're more important than ever. Trusted advisors and their networks, like us, will be more of an asset as businesses continue to conduct business across boundaries, municipal, provincial, county, state, international, where we never may get back to the old ways of the physical connections. Do we know this person? Have you been to this facility? What do you think? We need to rely on our networks that exist to get answers to those questions, because we can't get them readily ourselves anymore. Our clients can't get them readily ourselves anymore. And I think that we really need to utilize the infrastructure and the tools that are already in place. And our network Accrue has already been doing this successfully pre-emergency, and I can say that I've seen an evolution in the use of the infrastructure for networking purposes from day one. Chapters are connecting across chapters more and more. We're using the platforms in different ways. We're having crew coffees, we're having crew happy hours, we're doing yoga together, there's mindfulness sessions, but there's always also substantive content. It's just really, really important. We're weathering the storm, I guess, together. And it's not just within our own local market. So this is from Accrue Leadership Certificate Program. Imagine an umbrella in a storm. And I think we can all agree that we're in a bit of a storm at the moment. And our Accrue Network members and our chapters and the various parts that make up the umbrella. So they're the various parts, and the Accrue Network Global is a framework that's connecting all of those parts and extending the fabric that protects us from the rain. Yeah, a few drops are going to get through, but we're all working together to help each other and move forward. And there are so many virtual platforms already in place, CrewBiz, the Open Forum. I know Accrue Network has provided the Xoom platform to all of our chapters to enable programs to span both within the chapter as well as across chapters. And I want to just really hit home, it's an opportunity to get involved at this moment. I hated public speaking. I absolutely feared it. Wendy, who's on the phone, heard me the first time I spoke at a podium in front of 1,000 people. But this is an opportunity for people to use Xoom to present to 28 people, to 200 people, to hone their skills. So just take advantage of everything that's out there. And Accrue has a lot of opportunities. You can be creative, you can be resourceful. But I also think we also need to be thankful and be a connector and really help each other out, because it will come back in spades, maybe not eventually, but if you go out with a sense of service and a sense of helping others and connecting others, it does come back in spades. So anyways, thank you for having me.
Of course, Tara, to compliment you on that, I'll bring up two quick stories. So Accrue UK is launching a mentoring program about mid-June-ish. Some of you on this program know about it, but some are just learning about it now. And it is a way to get engaged. It is a way to connect. And we're looking forward to the launch. And I'll share real quick with everyone that I had just met John virtually, which again, I'm thankful for this new relationship, John. But John, you're never getting rid of me, see, because I invited you to be a mentor in our program, and you can't say no. And I'm really excited for you to be a part of it, and you're going to be great. So, we have, like I said, we have this mentoring program, and Tara, it speaks to what you just said. It's a chance to get engaged. It's a chance to give back. And it's a real chance to build our relationships in a virtual environment. So John, you did say yes, right? Can I just have everyone on the call hear you say yes, be a mentor?
Totally yes. And one thing I'd emphasize though as well, just hearing Tara speak then is I have to, for work, do loads of public speaking now and put myself forward for that kind of stuff. And when I always used to find it absolutely terrifying. I hated it so much. And even now I have to psych myself up into it, especially really big ones. So that's one thing I'd love to mentor people about, is because people say, oh, you look quite comfortable doing it. It's like, not at all. Like the preparation and the subterfuge used to do these things, it's a complicated mind game to get there. So if I had the opportunity to help people with that, or their social media profiles or whatever, I'd happily do so.
Yeah, so preparation is major. I could flash my notes here, but I'll save everybody from that. And then the other thing I wanted to mention too, in terms of building relationships and getting engaged, there's someone on the call who I met just before London went into lockdown. And I was so impressed with this person that I couldn't wait to connect with her again. Marie Freeman Robinson is on the phone. Yes, there you are. I see you. But I admire your position in the industry, and I admire what you bring to the table. And this whole virtual thing has enabled me an opportunity to connect with you on a routine basis. So talk about being thankful, building relationships, getting engaged, participating in a way that perhaps we haven't in the past is certainly something to be thankful for. So as a project manager, as a program person, you know that I keep my eye on the clock. We have about 10 minutes until the top of the hour. There's been a lot of helpful, beneficial, I think, intuitive information that's been shared. And I want to, obviously, if anyone has any questions or thoughts, please unmute yourself. We have about 10 minutes. We can certainly stay after if you'd like, but again, we'd love to hear from our participants today about their experiences, comments on what's been presented, etc.
Michelle, sorry, it's Tara speaking again. I just wanted to share also, Accrue Network. It is a business network, but it benefits you both. I think it's both personal and very, very professional. And I have used the network across the pond. I have used the network in the United States to connect my clients with both expertise as well as legal and other forms of service using my connections across this network. I have clients that, yes, they're based here in Canada, but they do have a national footprint. There was, an example where, and it was, I think it was my connection through Siobhan, who helped me find someone in a remote or near a remote town in Ireland to assist one of my clients here that's based out of Canada that has an international presence. So for the people that are on this call that that are members that haven't yet fully used the power of this network, it is so easy to connect and so easy to get intel and information and to be that trusted advisor to your clients through the use of this organization. If you haven't used it yet, talk to me. I can help you out, figure out how to navigate. And to the members, I'll call you our future members on this call, there are so many opportunities to connect and to grow both personally and professionally and grow your network through Accrue Network. There is truly no cold call and Accrue. We will call you back. Everybody has each other's back. I see that probably on a weekly basis when I reach out to say, hey, I'm looking for somebody here. Can you help? And it may be in Canada, it may be in the United States, it may be across the pond. But I can tell you, we all have each other's back. And anyways, I can't speak more highly about it. Thank you.
Tara, thank you for that. As a former Accrue New York board member, I'm echoing you 1,000%. Okay, with that, we do have a few minutes, and we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for calling me out in front of everybody on the call. I do have one question, just picking up on something that was said earlier about now being a really good time to be sort of virtually networking and getting your profile out there. I would say that I'm actually starting to feel a little bit bombarded by the volume of stuff that's coming out. I mean, it's coming out from all over the place, design houses, consultancies, McKinsey reports, like there's just all this information about COVID and what the new normal is and everything else. And I had a call with someone earlier today who said, we've just decided not to make any noise because a lot of people appear just to be making noise to justify their existence. And while I'm not suggesting that that's happening here, I just wonder how you find the right balance.
John, I'm gonna ask you to take that one because again, you're at the forefront as a head of marketing, engaging with different sectors, clients, and so forth, resources.
It's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking, please don't ask me to answer this one, but you did. No, it's a really good question. Not at all. It's a good question on the basis that there is a huge amount of noise. I mean, I'd like to think we're, as a group or personally, we're contributing positively to the debate. And the reason why I'd like to think we do that with a degree of confidence is that I'm speaking to both big corporate clients and flexible workspace operators directly to try and find out what's of interest to them and trying to replay it to them in a way that is helpful. So, using our data, maximizing our strengths to think, what is really pertinent? Because you're right, there's a huge amount of noise, a huge amount of hubris. Everyone's turned into virology experts and data experts overnight. Like, who knew there were so many in the world who could interpret NHS data that well? But you know what I mean? There's a lot of wasted space. But I don't think that means that you can't contribute positively because I think Kirsty was saying it, know your niche or write about what's passionate to you. And in life, I find in both those areas, if you find that sweet spot, you will create relevance and you will create something which will be positively accepted by the community. I strongly believe that, in fact. So there is a middle ground. There used to be a thing in journalism and then PR when I did that, whereby there's a sweet spot whereby the PRs are pushing out all these stories and when they're actually interesting to the journalists, and that's a very tangential small point in the marketing cycle, but it does exist, and that's hopefully why EG have taken my article this week, because I felt really impassioned about a piece they wrote last week, and I thought I've got to write about this. I have to get our point across. And so I'd like to think we can all do that, and we are contributing in a meaningful way. I hope that answers the question.
I don't mean to speak for Marie. You did, John. I think it is about remaining positive. Marie and I had this chat a couple of weeks ago, and about the volume of information being presented by various sources, and there is a lot. We as consumers and contributors to the marketplace and professionals in our industries, in our roles, we take that intel, we listen to the intel, and we make a decision for ourselves about how best to utilize the information, I guess. So, but positivity is one of my favorites. So I couldn't agree with you more. So again, I'm just keeping my eye on the clock. Does anyone else have a thought or a question that they'd like to share with the group? I like to end early, but please don't shy away. And I don't want to call out anybody else.
I'm just going to respond to the comment earlier, or the question in terms of making more noise. If someone puts something out and it's very thought-provoking or interesting or of value, saying thank you, like expressing gratitude and expressing, how it was utilized or who you forwarded this to, or how it can help, that will get your name out by applauding and extending gratitude without putting out more information into the marketplace.
That's a really valid point. Wendy, Wendy did that recently. Actually, not recently. It was a while back when Accrue Network hosted Spencer Levy, chief economist for CBRE. Wendy did just that. She couldn't say thank you enough, and I took a cue on that, especially virtual with so many people on the line. It was quite gracious. Well, I want to say thank you for everyone for joining today. The topic is one that is one of my favorites, and it's of the time, and I think it's an amazing opportunity to learn and to grow. So a special thank you to Tara to joining from Toronto, and Kristy from Luxembourg, and John from the countryside near London. You're all amazing, and I appreciate every ounce of time and input and intel that you've provided today. Thank you so much on behalf of Accrue. And we shall see you soon. Stay tuned for the next virtual program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.